Hi guys, John from LookSmart Home Inspections right here in New Jersey. And I want to talk to you guys today a little bit about what matters during a home inspection. And a home inspection, look, it can be an overwhelming process, especially if you're, new to the process, if this is your first house and you're going through your first home inspection. It can be daunting, it can be stressful, of course. Everything, in real estate right now in New Jersey, the whole process is filled with a lot of stress and a lot of worry and a lot of anxiety. But, what I want to do is just kind of tell you that there's some things that matter and there's some things that don't matter as much, right? And what I find recently is that clients, people buying homes, they're making some mistakes after the home inspection is over because they're confusing, really material issues and not and material and things that are not really that important or have a lesser importance sort of on the scope. Now, as a home inspector, I'm looking, and I told you guys before, most of my colleagues here in New Jersey, we're doing home inspections and we're including all the different things in a house, right? We're not, we're large things, medium sort of items as well, and also the smaller items as well. I think that's important too, just to give our client an idea of some of the smaller things that you should be fixing or just to keep on your radar, as you're living in the home that first, 1 or 2, 3 years. I think all of that is important, right? So we have our big basket, high dollar items. We'll call those the material defects, right? So material defects, that's the most important stuff, right? Stuff that's going to affect, the safety, the habitability, and the value of the home, right? And then you sort of have the medium bucket, and then you sort of have more of a cosmetic bucket, sort of aesthetics bucket. So, and all three are important, right? But what I find is that people muddle the buckets and they don't really have an idea of really what this bucket here, the material defects bucket, really is versus sort of the aesthetics bucket. And even though that this is really discussed during the home inspection and it's laid out in the report, but sometimes the waters get muddled, and I guess it's just a lot of information, going in, to a person at one time. You can't blame them. They have, the home inspection on their mind. They have the appraisal on their mind. They have the negotiation on their mind. They have two, agents in the process. They have an owner or a seller of a house, they're dealing with. They're trying to get their financing, ready to go. There's a lot of balls that a buyer today, especially in New Jersey, has to keep in the air. And so I think it's important to, understand what are the bigger items are, right? And so when I look at a house, I'm looking for, first and foremost, one of the top items is safety, right? So New Jersey home inspectors, we have safety on our mind, when we're doing a home inspection. So if you're bringing a young family into a new house and you're a first-time homeowner, you may not be cognizant of all of the potential safety hazards that, can happen in a home, right? There's a lot. And so we're bringing to light those items. And it depends on your contract whether you be able to ask for these items, to be corrected or not. But regardless, these are, items on the top of our list, right? As a home inspector here in New Jersey, we're thinking about your safety, right? And just to give you an idea, I was doing an inspection the other day and we had a deck that's, 2 stories off the ground, and I'm evaluating the deck structure, and I'm not liking the deck structure. It's an older deck. It doesn't conform to modern requirements for framing or structure. And I'm just trying to figure out, is this deck going to be okay? And my ultimate uh, at the end of the deck inspection, I'm like, this deck has to go. There's just too many problems here. And one of the problems that we found was rails, guardrails that were just too loose and too wide. And to me, that's a big safety problem, right? Because I'm pushing against the guardrail, and the guardrail is just it's going back and forth like this, and I'm just using moderate pressure. Now, that's a safety issue to me. That's kind of a big deal because if you have your friends over, your family celebrating the new house, barbecue up on your deck, and you're not aware that the rails are so loose, somebody can fall and get really hurt or worse, actually. And then we had deck connection problems, and then we had deck stair problems, and then we had wood rot, and then we had sort of deck deflection issues. So those things to me are a big deal, are a big big deal. And yes, some of that will fall into the structural category of your contract too, hopefully, if defined what structural concerns are in your contract. In a previous video, I mentioned that's really important to actually to figure out, is what actually are you able to ask for corrections or credits about. So we're looking for safety for sure. And the next thing we're looking for is and also safety has to do with electrical and the wiring in the home. Safety has to do with handrails, guardrails inside the home, any type of tripping hazards, any type of risks where a built-in cabinetry or a cabinetry would fall on a child, right? Stairs without rails, steps that are unsafe, uneven, different floor planes in the home. All of this really has to do with the safety, component in the home. And electrical, certainly would fall into that basket as well. And, the other really sort of the other big basket would be, structural concerns, right? So we want to for sure call out all structural concerns that we have in the home. And just to give you an idea, foundation wall cracking, horizontal cracking, hydraulic, caused by hydraulic loads on the foundation, wide cracks, movement of the foundation, poor framing and support either in the attic or the basement. These are structural concerns. We have also discussed concerns with exterior cladding, stuccos, things like that. How's the deck look, like we were just talking about? That could be a structural concern. The chimney can be a structural concern. We find all different types of, chimney problems. So that goes sort of into our high ticket basket, for sure. So very, very important. Home inspectors here in New Jersey, we're going to be, obviously focusing on everything, but really paying attention to safety, your safety in the house, your family's safety in the house and around the house, and also structural, concerns throughout the home. Super, super important, right? And, that has to do with the roof, the deck, cracking, different structures, even detached buildings such as garages or barns, right? We want to make sure that all that is structurally sound, and that really is that fits into that main important basket of problems, right? And the next thing is water, right? We're always thinking about water. Home inspectors here in New Jersey, we have water on our mind. If it's one thing that every single inspection we think about is water. Where's the water going? What's the water doing, right? Two things, right? And there's so many things. Water destroys homes. I mean, it's just horrible for structures, and we need to make sure as home inspectors that the water is being controlled. And that's, a lot of different things. Is it being controlled around the home as far as the grading, and we've talked about grading incessantly, right? Is it being controlled inside the basement or crawl space, right? Do we have problems with efflorescence, water intrusion, staining, mold growth inside the basement or the crawl space? And how is that being dealt with, right? So that's another major thing on our mind as home inspectors here in New Jersey. And besides that, we also have the roof. How is the roofing system dealing with all this water? And I'm not just, there's a lot of components to a roof, right? There's, the roof covering, the roof decking, there's the underlayment, right? There's drip edges, there's gutters, there's leaders, there's downspouts and downspout extensions. And then we have, soffit and fascia and ventilation, all of this roofing situation. There's so much that we have to look at and we have to make judgments about. And that's why I enjoy the job so much. It's always a learning process. You're always learning about these different things and how systems work, and you're always improving, always striving to be better, than we were yesterday, right? And so that's our main basket of stuff, right? And you would probably put electrical defects in that basket too. A lot of electrical problems. I mean, electricity can cause you injury. Bad or homeowner or poor electrical, can cause a fire in your house and, possibly, take the life of yourself or a family member. So, you're putting a lot of trust in your New Jersey home inspector, right? And we take that trust seriously, and we really do the job. We try to do the job in a way that's helpful and also that is giving you the right information, to make decisions on this house, right? So, we have that basket, right? So, what I'm trying to really tell you is that after reading the report, you need to figure out what basket do these problems fall into, right? So that's our big basket, right? There's more to the big basket, but that's the big basket. And then you just sort of have the medium basket, right? Maybe we have, a leaking valve. Maybe we have some problems with the plumbing that are not an emergency, not basket high level, but basket medium, right? And whether you guys can ask for that correction or remediation, that's something that you'll have to work out with your attorney and your real estate agent. But we don't want to muddle these baskets. We don't want to say, this problem, say this nail pop issue in this room, right? We have maybe a dozen nail pops in a ceiling in, say, a dining room, right? We don't want to muddle that issue with, electrical, with homeowner electrical wiring, right? Because they're two different things, right? One is a significant high level issue that can burn your house down, right? If we have open splices, poor electrical, loose and hanging wires, just bad electrical. And the other one is an aesthetic problem, right? It's not going to hurt you. Having nail pops in a home is not going to hurt you. And, that could be corrected at some other time when maybe you paint the room or paint the house, right? And then we have, some other stuff in the home where we have, take, for example, some loose fixtures, or, we have a problem with, maybe the control of the shower, that type of thing. The shower head is clogged or obstructed. That's not a high level basket item. Those are more of the lower level basket items, right? So really what you guys need to do is figure out where the basket of problems fall into. And part of this is, and what I think is important, is to put a summary on a report. I've been putting summaries on reports for 25 years. I've never had an issue with it. And I've said this in past videos as well. At least it gives your client an idea of the high level problems, right? So in my mind, I'm putting this basket of problems, right? The high level basket of problems on one or two pages up front in the report that's labeled summary, right? And that summary is not going to have a lot of the middle issues, right? The middle basket of problems, and it's not going to for sure have the other basket of problems like the cosmetic and aesthetic problems, right? That's something that is sort of a lower level on the scale of importance. So, summaries are important. And also, being able to contact your home inspector after the inspection is also important, right? Because you're going to have questions, especially if you're a first-time buyer. A lot of the times you may want to go and just get some clarity on a couple of items. I personally don't have a problem with saying, this problem is more important than this problem. Now, I know that some home inspectors might have a problem with that, and they run their business how they run their business, and that's fine. I respect that, not a problem. But I don't have an issue with trying to direct a client to the higher level problems. This basket is what you should be focusing on, and not asking for this. And I've had clients, they after the fact, and they'll put a letter together from their attorney and say, this is what we're asking for. And if they want me, not often, but sometimes they want me to come back to the house. And they didn't call me and to go over that or discuss anything. And I'm looking at this list and I'm saying, gee whiz, why are you asking for these things when you should be asking for these things? These are the issues, not these. You're kind of got hung up on the wrong stuff. So I think it's our job as home inspectors also is to direct our clients, especially if they don't have any experience with home ownership, as to what the higher level items are. I don't see that being a conflict. I don't see that being a liability issue. I don't see that in any way has that ever become a problem. Maybe other home inspectors here in New Jersey have had that issue come back and be a problem for one reason or the other, which is okay. And they can change their business plan, to reflect that. But I think it's important to give our clients the right information so that they can make the right, decisions and educated decisions about the house. So don't be afraid to reach out back to your home inspector and go through, some of the items if you wanted to. Just get clarity on those issues. I think it's important, and I don't have problem with clients coming back either by email, text, or phone, about these things, right? And another thing I want you guys to understand is that when we do a home inspection, I try to tell you how old the equipment is in the home, right? So if I'm telling you the water heater is, manufactured in XYZ and say it's 12 years old, right? And then, the furnace is, 22 years old and the air conditioning is, 17 years old, whatever. But everything is in working order. And then you guys call me and you say, I'm going to ask for, a new air conditioning unit, or I'm going to ask for a new water heater unit. That's probably not where you want to focus your attention, because you're kind of losing your ability to negotiate, where you should be focusing on non-working items in the home. And the way that most contracts are written now is that if the piece of equipment is operating as intended and is effective, you're not going to be able to ask for, at least my understanding, and most contracts are written for replacement of a water heater that's working, and just because it's just generally out of its, statistical life expectancy. The same thing with air conditioning, and the same thing with a furnace or a boiler, those type of things. And we also try to give you an idea how old the washer dry. At least I do. And this is not required, but I try to do it if I can do it. Is to give you an idea of how old the washer dryer, if that's going to stay, how old the the dishwasher would be, the microwave, that type of stuff. Just because, these things have a finite life expectancy and you want to just be able to plan for that replacement. We don't do it so you can get, the firepower necessary to ask the owner for a new microwave or a new refrigerator. That's not really going to happen in today's market. I mean, it might have happened 15 years ago. I do remember where you can just give a seller a punch list of items and, it have all, small, big, medium items, but that's not really the market environment that we're in today. And that, buyers have to understand that they don't really have sort of the leverage that they've had in years past. It's still, and I don't have, and I do actually have the hard data. We're still in a very, in a seller's market here in New Jersey. So inventory is relatively low, and we have more people chasing homes than homes available, keeping home prices, high. Interest rates are still high. And you know what's also high? The stress level in everybody is also still really high. And so I just wanted to make this video. Maybe it'll give you some information sort of about when you go into your home inspection, understanding that, you should put the items in 3 different buckets and you should focus on correction of that, that's sort of that larger, basket or bucket. I think that's crucially important for sure. Don't focus on the small stuff after the home inspection. Make sure that you're aware. And if you're not aware, ask somebody. Ask, even if it's a family member who has experience in a home, or a contracting friend, or definitely even go back, to your home inspector, right? And don't rush these decisions, even though the market and many people in this process are telling you to rush. And it is a very rushed situation now. And I find it uncomfortable, and I find it really putting the buyer of real estate or homes today in a situation that is really, they're under an extreme amount of pressure to get decisions made in a very, quick time frame. What used to take a couple of weeks is now, down to just a few days. You don't have time to weigh a couple of houses, your decision making. It's either you put an offer down, you go over asking, you try to get the house very quickly, and then if you wait on it, somebody else is just going to buy that house basically and out from under you. And so that's the reality that we have. Whether we like it, whether we don't like it, it just is, so we have to just kind of tailor our our ability to do home inspections, to service our clients in a way that's, more fruitful for this, type of environment. And so that's really all I have on that. Make sure you ask questions during the home inspection. Make sure you ask questions, after the home inspection. I think that's very important. And I wanted to touch upon one thing, back to our water discussion. And I found in a client's house, there in a basement was finished, right? And over at the corner of the basement, there was probably, if you guys are old enough to remember, a $50 size, actually probably a dollar size, silver dollar size water stain, right? Innocuous, didn't look like anything much. And we put it in the report. And the client asked me, how do I know where that's coming from? We ran water. There was a bathroom above the stain. So I ran water. I used a thermal imaging camera. And I even used a moisture meter, negative for all of that, right? So I said, really, if you're that concerned about it, you could ask the owner of the house, the seller of the house, to open the ceiling in that area, right? and do what we call an invasive test, right? Home inspections here in New Jersey are visual. We're not doing invasive testing. I'm not permitted to take out my drywall saw and, open the ceiling. Now, look, most owners of homes will not allow that, right? Why would they? They have three offers other than you, probably, maybe more, and those three offers are not asking to open a ceiling. So, but in this case, just to kind of bring it full circle, the owner of the home was a really stand-up gentleman, and infinite respect for him and what he was, about. And he was about clarity and concern and, not passing off a problem to the new buyer of the house. And he didn't even know that this stain was there. I pointed it out. This is a stand-up guy. Now, this is a unicorn, okay? This is not every transaction. So if you're thinking that you're going to open up a ceiling where a water stain is in a house that you're buying, you are probably mistaken. But in any event, just to give you an idea, we opened the ceiling, right? They opened the ceiling. I went back. So what was happening was that this was groundwater that was coming through a patio connection to the house where a flashing has failed. And the groundwater was coming in and it completely rotted out the band joist and the sill plate roughly 9 feet along one side and then 4 feet in front of the house. So this is a left front corner of a home, right? And they had a patio there, right? Patio at the corner. And I have to tell you, I didn't expect this. Like, I just expected to see just a water stain, maybe a drip from a toilet wax ring or something. I didn't expect this. So it just kind of goes to show you that even a small water stain, maybe that big, led to about $8,000 worth of structural damage that had to be corrected in this house. That, would have never really be seen properly unless the owner of the home was upright and a good person, and they decided to work with the buyer to open the home. And it was just really important, and it really stressed to me that even a small water stain or you never know what is going on behind it, right? I wouldn't have guessed. Right, my mind went to the half bathroom above this area for sure. And I said to myself, that leak is probably from the toilet, right? Because the toilet was just in that vicinity, kind of lined up correctly. And I'm like, that's a toilet. But upon further investigation, it ended up being this big, monumental structural concern. So, the moral of the story is don't neglect even small water stains because they can have, much, much larger, like the tip of the iceberg sort of thing, Like the iceberg is a small thing and under the ice is something that is far more, much more larger than you think. So that kind of, taught me something. And where I was just like that's a minor thing. Now I have to go back and I have to say, that minor thing, that little water stain really was a large item. So if you see these minor stains in homes, point them out to your home inspector. As home inspectors here in New Jersey, we're for sure looking, for all of these water stains and water penetration issues. We're using thermal imaging, we're using moisture meters, we're using our own eyes, we're using our experience for sure too. So that's all I have for you today, guys. Thank you for watching. If it helps one or two people, I'm happy about that. Reach out if you have any questions. I'm John from LookSmart Home Inspections right here in New Jersey. Have a great day.